Welcome back to the Bob Harden Show. And now here's your host, Bob Harden.
Thanks so much for joining us here on the show. It's brought to you in part by the good folks at Johnson's Air Conditioning, Naples' longest established air conditioning company, as well as Gulf Shore Playhouse, bringing you professional New York-style theater at its very best. Visit the website, gulfshoreplayhouse.org. Coming up, going to be visiting with Jim McTeague. He's a contributing editor of Barron's Magazine. Right now, we have with us Dan Peterson. Dan is the director of private property rights at the James Madison Institute. I should say the Center for Private Property Rights at the James Madison Institute. Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here. Good to be with you, Bob.
Thank you. And it was great to be with you last night. You were the co-moderator with me at the Southwest Florida Citizens Alliance forum for congressional candidates. And I must say, you did a great job, but also the candidates were so well prepared, especially in your area, I thought, with regard to Everglades restoration.
Well, and it was really fun doing that with you, too, and that was my first experience to go through it, so I appreciated being able to kind of see how you did it. But I was impressed with their knowledge of a lot of the facts. I didn't know if they would be so well versed on it. I thought it was interesting because 4 out of the 5 candidates are more on the Republican side or Libertarian side, mm-hmm. So it was interesting to see them sort of say the same things and support the same policies, but try to distinguish themselves in some of the nuances. So it was a fascinating process.
Well, I must admit, and so let's move to your, you wrote Solving the Everglades Riddle, Addressing Water Quality and Quantity to Restore a Florida Legacy. This was just issued. There was a conference call last week. Unfortunately, I was unable to be on the conference call, but I just spoke with Kathleen Pasadomo, our state representative. She said she was on the call, and it was really, really well done. So I, for one, feel very ignorant about these issues, and certainly talk about the importance of Everglades restoration, but quite frankly, I'm kind of in the dark about what the issues are as well as the solutions. So maybe we could pick up where we stopped last week.
Well, that'd be great. You know, one of the things in the paper that I list out are 4 factors that have led to some real successes in terms of Everglades restoration, mm-hmm. and maybe I can give a little bit of overview on that, and then any listeners can go to jamesmadison.org on the internet, and they can find the Everglades paper and read more of the detail. But, you know, one of the factors I was so surprised to see, because I went down and toured, and I visited a lot of these places. I talked to a lot of people. One of the surprising things was to learn how best management practices used by the agricultural community south of Lake Okeechobee in that area called the Everglades agricultural area. Best management practices have so improved over the years, and in fact, agriculture actually is making a huge contribution to putting clean water back into the Everglades like never before.
Wow.
And there are a number of reasons for that. You know, a lot of the controversy, some people try to point out, is it's the agriculture people who are polluting the Everglades. Mm-hmm. And that just doesn't add up to the facts anymore, because they are doing some tremendous things to clean water and prevent fertilizers and all kinds of runoff from getting into the Everglades system, and they recycle everything. So that's a great success story using best management practices.
I had no idea, Dan. That, to me, I would have sworn, actually, that was the cause of what's happening right now. So that is a big surprise. What else?
Well, yeah, and just what you just said, that's what so many people answer. And that's why I often say, I think what is happening in the Everglades is the best untold story that we have in Florida. So a second factor is the building out of these these areas that are called STAs, stormwater treatment areas. Mm-hmm. And these are areas that can be thousands of acres. And what they do is they pump the nutrient-rich waters out of these canals coming out of Lake Okeechobee flowing south. They pump them out of that lake in these areas, and they put them into these, they're really huge man-made created wetlands areas. Mm-hmm. These wetlands are scientifically planted with grasses so that as the water flows through these stormwater treatment areas, it actually cleanses the water. And then they take the clean water and they pump it back into the Everglades. But Bob, these areas, some of them, the one I observed and saw was approximately the entire size of the layout for the city of Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Wow.
So these are, I think the one I saw was something on the neighborhood of 17,000 17,000 acres.
All right, so this is on state land then, and it's being managed by the state?
Yes, these would be state-owned lands, and they have created these man-made wetland areas, and as the water flows through, it's cleaned and it's taken back out and sent back to the Everglades. So that's a second big factor.
Mm-hmm.
And again, in the paper, it explains some of that, and there's places, I guess, where people could go and learn more about it.
And then,
a third, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask about the third.
Well, the third was one, I remember being up in the legislative session either last year or the year before, and in some of the environmental Senate committees, legislators were saying, why do we not have a plan out there for restoring the Everglades? It just seems like we perpetually spend money, or we're asked to allocate money, and when are we going to get this job finished? And one of the things in my research I found was the Florida Department of Environmental Protection actually has a 20-year layout using SERP, the big federal project, and I think there are something like 62 projects currently with others to be put into the pot. But they have actually this 20-year plan that over time it will put the Everglades into a place where it is sustainable on its own to maintain its own ecosystem. And so that was kind of a surprising thing to me, and that's highlighted in the paper. And then finally, the fourth thing, some of the legislators really stepped up to the plate and made some great laws this year. One of them was a law called Legacy Florida, and this was spearheaded by Senate President-elect Joe Negron and Gail Harrell on the House side. They sponsored this thing called Legacy Florida, and what it does is it takes $200 million for the life of Amendment 1. It takes $200 million from Amendment 1 funds to be used towards solving some of the most urgent problems that the Everglades has. Now, there were additional monies that were also targeted to help solve problems in places like Lake Apopka and one other place. But to know that there is consistent funding that is going to be there for the next 15 to 20 years, the life of Amendment 1, really helps the people who are trying to solve these problems with these different projects to know that there's going to be funding, it's going to be consistent, it's going to be recurring. That's going to put us way down the road.
So this is all good news so far. I mean, what you're spelling out is there's so many things in place right now that are helping to support the restoration of the Everglades. Sounds like the big problem is the dike up and the what's happening up in Lake Okeechobee.
I would say that's probably the most acutely felt issue that needs the most immediate attention. But again, there are plans out there, to build the reservoirs to capture and cleanse water before it gets to Lake Okeechobee, and then of course that will take great pressure off the use of those STAs, the stormwater treatment areas to the south. One of the interesting questions that we talked about last night was, do you support the use of federal money to build water storage treatment areas to the south of Lake Okeechobee?
Mm-hmm.
And, the answers were kind of varied. That was a pretty open-ended question as well. And, I would say from my perspective, it's not that I would say never do that. But we have such great possibilities for the use of water storage to the north of Lake Okeechobee. And I think we talked about this on Friday. If you go into your kitchen and you see your sink is about to overflow, rather than drilling another drain in the bottom of your sink, is probably going to be faster and easier to limit or to eliminate the water that's coming out of the faucet and filling up your sink.
Right.
So I think that would be the priority, as I understand it, and most experts would all agree on this, that if we can stop the water north of Lake Okeechobee and begin to cleanse it and put it back in, that is going to relieve a lot of the pressure from having to send this nutrient-rich water to the east and to the west when the lake fills up, and it's going to fill up. It just has a certain capacity, and
right.
And the reinforcement of the Herbert Hoover Dike is just a very slow and a very expensive project, but it needs to be done, and it will be another piece to the puzzle.
Absolutely. Dan Peterson again. I think this is just absolutely terrific information. Not surprising, coming from the James Madison Institute, terrific organization, really addressing policy issues for the state of Florida. I think the best of its kind. And Dan Peterson again, the director of the Center for Private Property Rights at the James Madison Institute. Visit jamesmadison.org. One word, jamesmadison.org. Great website, and you'll find Solving the Everglades Riddle, addressing water quality and quantity to restore a Florida legacy right at the top of the webpage. Dan, great being with you last night. Great having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, you are welcome. I enjoyed it, too. It's great being with you.
Thank you so much.